Chapter 9. A few mornings later, at the end of the lesson, Matt delayed Attain. "How did you kill that rabbit?" he asked, pointing to the offering Attain had thrown on the table. "There's no bullet hole in it." "Indian not use bullet for rabbit," Attain answered scornfully. "Then how? There's no hole at all." For a moment it seemed that Attain would not bother to answer. Then Attain shrugged. "Attain show," he said. "Come." Matt was dumbfounded. It was the first sign the Indian had given of what exactly? He had not sounded friendly, but there was not time to puzzle this out right now. Attain was walking across a clearing. He had apparently expected Matt to follow. Pleased and curious, Matt hobbled after him, grateful he no longer needed the crutch. At the end of the clearing, the Indian stooped and searched the ground. Presently, he stooped down under the black spruce tree, poked about in the dirt, and jerked up along a snake-like root. He drew from the leather pouch at his belt a curious sort of knife, a blade curved into a hook. With one sure stroke, he split one end of the root, then peeled off the bark by pulling at it with his teeth. He separated the whole length into 2 strands, which he spliced together by rolling them against his bare thigh. Next he searched about the bushes till he found 2 forked saplings, about 3 feet apart. He trimmed the twigs from these, drawing his knife toward his chest, as Matt had been taught not to do. Then he cut a stout branch and rested it lightly across the forks of his saplings. From the thread-like root he made the noose and suspended it from the stick so that it hung just above the ground. He worked without speaking, and it seemed to Matt that all of this took him no time at all. "Rabbit run into trap," he said finally. "Pull stick into bush so white boy can kill." "Golly," said Matt, filled with admiration. "I hadn't thought of making a snare. I didn't know you could make one without string or wire." "Make more," Attain ordered, pointing into the woods. "Not too close." After Attain had gone, Matt managed to make 2 more snares. They were clumsy things, and he was not too proud of them. Splitting the slippery root, he had discovered it was not so easy as it had looked. He spoiled a number of them before he mastered the trick of splicing them together. They did not slide as easily as the one Attain had made, but they seemed strong enough. The next morning he showed the traps to Attain. He had hoped for some sign of approval, but all he got was a grunt and a shrug. He knew that to Attain his work must look childish. However, on the 3rd day, one of his own snares had been upset, though the animal had got away. The day after that, to his joy, there was actually a partridge struggling to free itself in the bushes where the stick had caught. This time, the grunt with which Attain rewarded him sounded very much like his grandfather's "good." Silently, Attain watched as Matt reset the snare. Then they walked back to the cabin, Matt swinging his catch as nonchalantly as he had seen Attain do. "You don't need to bring me any more food," he boasted. "I'll catch my own meat from now on." Nevertheless, Attain continued to bring him some offering every morning, not always fresh meat. He seemed to know exactly when Matt had finished the last scrap of rabbit or duck. Sometimes he brought a slab of corn cake or a pouch full of nuts, once a small cake of maple sugar. Plainly, he felt bound to keep the terms of his grandfather's treaty. Matt stuck to his part of the bargain as well, though the lessons were an ordeal for them both. Matt knew well enough what a poor teacher he was. Sometimes it seemed that Attain was learning in spite of him. Once the Indian had resigned himself to mastering 26 letters. He took them in a gulp, scorning the childish candle and door and table that Matt had devised. Soon he was spelling out simple words. The real trouble was that Attain was contemptuous, and that the whole matter of white man's words seemed to him nonsense. Impatiently they hurried through the lessons to get on with Robinson Crusoe. Matt suspected that the only reason Attain agreed to come back day after day was that he wanted to hear more of that story. Skipping over the pages that sounded like sermons, Matt chose the sections that he liked best. Now he came to rescue of the man Friday. Attain sat quietly, and Matt almost forgot him in his own enjoyment of his favorite scene. There was a mysterious footprint in the sand, canoes drawn up on the lonely beach, and a strange and wild-looking men with 2 captives. One of the captives they mercilessly slaughtered. The fire was set blazing for a cannibal feast. Then a second captive made a desperate escape, running straight to where Caruso stood, watching. 2 savages pursued him with horrid yells. Matt glanced up from the book and saw that Atane's eyes were gleaming. He hurried on. No need to skip here. Caruso struck a mighty blow at the first cannibal, knocking him senseless. Then, seeing that the other was fitting an arrow into his bow, he shot and killed him. Matt read on. The poor savage who fled had stopped, though he saw both his enemies had fallen. Yet he was so frightened with the noise, the fire of my piece, that he stood stock still, and then neither came forward nor went backward. I hallooed to him again, and made signs to him to come forward, to which he easily understood, and came a little way, then stopped again. He stood trembling, as if he had been taken prisoner, and just had been to be killed, as his 2 enemies were. I beckoned to him again to come to me, and gave all signs of encouragement that I could think of, and he came nearer and nearer, kneeling down every 10 or 12 steps in tokens of acknowledgment for saving his life. I smiled at him and looked pleasantly, and beckoned him to come still nearer. At length he came close to me, and then he kneeled down again, kissed the ground, and taking my foot, set upon it his head. This, it seemed, was a token of swearing to be my slave forever. Atane sprang to his feet, and thunder cloud wiping out all pleasure from his face. "Nada," he shouted. "Not so." Matt stopped, bewildered. "Him never do that." "Never do what?" "Never kneel down to white man." But Caruso had saved his life. "Not kneel down," Atane repeated fiercely. "Not be slave. Better die." Matt opened his mouth to protest, but Atane gave him no chance. In 3 steps he was out of the cabin. Now he'll never come back, Matt thought. He sat slowly turning over the pages. He had never questioned that story. Like Robinson Crusoe, he had thought it natural and right that the wild man should be the white man's slave. Was there perhaps another possibility? The thought was new and troubling.